everybody, it's Mandela coming to you again from beautiful Oakland, California. Today I'm here to talk to you about something that I think needs to be addressed far more than it is. And that is the difference between a small business and a startup. People come to me asking me for advice all the time about ideas they have, how to get it off the ground, which business models are best for their ventures, etc. But I oftentimes advise them to hold on, pump your brakes, and first get really clear. Are you building a startup or are you building a small business? Today's video, I'm going to cover the 10 key differences between a startup and a small business. And I'm hoping to do it in just 10 minutes. So let's get started. The first key difference between a startup and a small business centers around the concept of innovation. How innovative are you or do you have to be to succeed? When it comes to a small business, oftentimes there's already a blueprint laid out for how to do that business again. For instance, think about a restaurant, maybe a hair salon. What about law practice? All of those things are tried and true businesses that someone like yourself can go out and replicate. Of course, you're going to put your little special swag on it. It's going to be unique to you. But again, it's with the concept that you don't have to be as innovative when you're building a small business because more than likely there's a blueprint already out there. On the other end of the spectrum, when it comes to startups, innovation is absolutely paramount. As a startup founder, you are charged with either doing something that's never been done before. Think about creating wearables or breaking into an industry and disrupting it like Uber or Lyft or Airbnb. Or you're going to be doing something so different and better than anything that's been done before. So again, the number one key difference between a startup and a small business is innovation. The second key difference between a startup and a small business is scale. How quickly, how big do you want to get? And when you think of a small business, it's really about constrained growth. The business owner themselves gets to decide how big they want to make this thing. Maybe their desire really is to just have the ice cream shop on that street corner they grew up on back in Philadelphia. Maybe the hairdresser really just wants to open up a salon with her sister that they've dreamed about. All of that is constrained growth. Perhaps they do have aspirations to scale it one day, but for right now, they're okay with starting with just one and getting that right first. Whereas when it comes to a startup and scaling, the whole premise is to go as big and as fast as possible. So the sky really is the limit in terms of how big a startup gets. It's not necessarily confined to one community, neighborhood, town, city, or even state. Most startups are trying to go nationwide or even global. So again, the first two differences between a startup and small business center around innovation and scale. The third difference between a startup and a small business centers around growth rate. And I touched upon it just a bit in the last section, but I think it deserves its own category because it's so important. Growth rate centers on how fast you want to go. So again, if you understand that a small business is really about constrained growth that is dependent upon the business owners, maybe their personal desires, or even the money they have available, and a startup is all about let's make this thing as big as possible, the growth rate, again, is really different. A small business, they can take their time, get the model right in one city, and then maybe expand it to another city 2-3 years down the line, whereas a startup is trying to grow as quickly as possible. Have you guys ever heard the analogy of the hockey stick up and to the right? That's really what a lot of founders are aspiring to when they build a startup. Up and to the right, their user growth, their profits, as big as fast as possible. All right. Now on to the fourth difference between a startup and a small business, and this one centers around profits. How profitable are these two entities going to be? Whereas a small business, again, because it's constrained growth, oftentimes its profits are constrained as well. And so One thing to keep in mind though is that in order for a business to stay in operation, it really is trying to generate revenues as quickly as possible. So any small business, whether it's a nail salon, a hair salon, a law profession, a doctor's office, all of those are set up to try to bring in money, profits right away because they need it in order to pay the rent, in order to pay their staff, etc. The startup situation is a little bit different because startups these days can basically get off the ground without having to invest a lot of money because of all these beautiful services that are out there, like build a website in a weekend. A lot of the founders don't have to front a lot of money necessarily. And so because of this, they can focus on building a beautiful product and trying to find that product market fit and the customers, the users who love what they do without necessarily relying on a profit up front. Down the line, of course, everything is going to be dependent on their ability to bring in profits because that determines sustainability. All right, so again, just to recap, because I know I'm covering a lot. So far, I've covered the differences between a small business and a startup, and they are innovation, scale, growth rate, and profit. The fifth one, we're halfway there already, so good job, you guys, is about financing. Where's the money going to come from to finance these operations? When it comes to a small business, more than likely people are dipping into their own checking account, perhaps their savings account, retirement funds, even maybe the funds that their parents left them behind, etc. Or they're taking out loans from a bank. And there's even government loans now that, or even government grants that people can apply for. So for instance, my girlfriend back in, where's she at? Chicago. She's an African-American woman and she has a small business. She applied for a grant from the US government and they were able to supply it to her because they support minority-owned businesses. So that's just one example of how someone can finance a small business. On the other end of a startup, remember I told you, oftentimes there isn't much upfront cost in order to get your startup off the ground. If it's a mobile app or a website, you're probably going to invest up to $100 to get it all up and running at first. And then as you scale and you grow, you may look to platforms like crowdfunding platforms, for instance, like Indiegogo or Kickstarter, where you can present what you're going to build to your target audience and they can pay for it before you even build it. So that's a new strategy that's gained popularity over the last couple years. Another financing option that's pretty common amongst startup founders is dipping into their friends and family as well. But in addition to that, looping in angel investors or seed investors. In that investor category are basically people with disposable incomes that give money to a startup founder in exchange for equity, which is a portion of the company. And that's how many startups get financed at first, so that they can pay themselves a salary and start focusing on developing a beautiful product that people want to pay for and use. The next difference is technology, the degree to which these businesses are dependent upon technology. When it comes to a small business, for sure they can enlist technology when it comes to crunching their numbers with accounting or doing financing, or even think about a restaurant. When the hostess is up front, she may have an app on an iPad that basically tells her which seats are available, where she can see the patrons coming in. Or perhaps there's a waiter taking someone's order on a phone app. All of these are technology that small businesses enlist to operate. However, if you think about it, take that technology away, would their core business go away? More than likely not. So in that case, many small businesses are not dependent on technology, but they benefit from it. On the flip side, when it comes to startups, technology is pretty key because, again, the whole premise of a startup is to get as big as quickly as possible. And there's nothing like technology when it comes to scale. And so whether it is a tech product itself or a tech-enabled product, the technology piece to startups is core because that helps it grow and scale, which is part of a startup's DNA. All right, we are on I'm looking at my list here, item number 7. You guys are sticking with me, great. So another key difference between a startup and a small business is lifespan. So when, after 3 years of being in business, okay, when we look at a small business and a startup, 32% of small businesses go out of business within 30 years. I'll say that again. 32% of small businesses go out of business within 3 years. Whereas with startups over here, 92, you can't even see it, I'm sure it's out of the frame. 92% of startups go out of business. So as you can see, the likelihood of these businesses living on are very different depending on which type of model they're going after. So again, that's something to consider if you're going to be a small business or a startup. Another thing to consider is leadership. Leadership, again, is about management of people. How many people are you going to have in your operating system? So because a small business is all about constrained, controlled growth, your management and leadership abilities are going to be dependent on the requirements of your team, how complex your business model is, etc. But for the most part, again, it's constrained growth. So you are in somewhat more control. On the flip side of a startup, because the whole premise is to get as big as fast as possible, you're going to need to enlist a variety of stakeholders along the way. So that includes your advisors, your investors, your employees, your accountants, your lawyers, a bunch of people, and they're all looking to you, the founder or CEO, for guidance, leadership. And so it's a really big responsibility, especially as your company grows. And it requires that you evolve as a leader as well. All right. And then there were 2. Now, for the final 2 items in our list of 10 differences between a startup and a small business, you probably notice I've gotten a bit closer to the camera, and that's just because I want to make sure you're still with me. I know it's a lot of content. Don't worry, I'm going to leave plenty of notes in the comment section below. But just to finish this out, our final 2 items of differences between a startup and a small business are, drumroll please, lifestyle. There's a big difference between if you're going to be a small business owner and if you're going to be a startup founder. Whereas the whole concept of being a startup business owner is really about constrained, controlled growth, being in control of how fast you're going, where you're expanding to. It's the same concept when thinking about how you're going to spend your 24 hours. What part of that day is allocated towards your business versus your home life, your personal life. A lot of people go into wanting to do a small business because it can afford them the opportunity to have a lifestyle business where not every hour of their day is dedicated to building their business, and it still allows for them to tend to other things and relationships that are important to them. On the flip side, a startup founder, as you remember, the premise is all about fast, big growth as quickly as possible. And so there's a lot of pressure, especially in those first couple years, to put your all into it. So you very may well not have a vacation for a couple years. I know when I was a startup founder, no vacations, no playtime, all business. And I'll tell you why. Because we decided to take investor dollars, which is what a lot of startup founders do. And so not only am I responsible for myself, my teammates, but I'm also responsible for making sure my investors get some pretty awesome returns. So all in all, it's a lot of pressure. Either way, you decide to be a small business owner or a startup founder, it's not a 9 to 5. You don't have that luxury of clocking in and out at a certain time every day. Things come up all the time, and so you're going to have to be flexible and willing to put in some extra hours than if you had a nice, cushiony, stable job. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, you have made it. Drum roll, please. To number 10 difference between a startup and a small business, and that is exit strategy. What's your plan after this is all said and done? What are you going to do? A lot of small business owners look to passing on their business to a family member, a friend, a trusted confidant perhaps. Maybe even thinking about if there's an opportunity to sell their business to a larger entity. That's really kind of on the roadmap of most small business owners. When you look at startup founders on the other end, they're really interested in 2 main outcomes. One is a sell. Think about LinkedIn just recently sold to Microsoft for $26.2 billion. Yes, I said billion with a B, a ton of money. I had to watch my language, a ton of money, and that's what a lot of startup founders are hoping they'll have, that type of sell. But the other exit option for a startup founder is IPOing, and that means their company has gone public, it's reporting on the New York Stock Exchange, and other people can now purchase shares in that company. And that's not a bad outcome either. You should just ask Jeff Lawson, the founder of Twilio, which was the first tech company of 2016 this year to IPO. So Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you have made it through all 10 differences. I don't know if I quite kept it under 10 minutes, but hopefully it was worth your time. And just to quickly recap in 10 seconds, not 10 minutes, the 10 key differences between a startup and a small business. And they are innovation, scale, growth, profit, financing, technology, lifespan, leadership, lifestyle, exit strategy. I promise you I'll remember all 10 without looking at the list in the future. I hope this was helpful to you. Either way, please leave me a comment below. I love to receive them. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to share it with your friends and family. I'll be forever grateful. And if you really like where I'm going with this content, be sure to subscribe to my channel where you will be in the know about all the videos I post coming up. Thanks so much for your time, and I hope you guys have a great day.